We still really need to hammer in the importance of digital literacy very early on in our public education systems to make sure that we're really addressing this crisis.
Welcome to Schools In, your go-to podcast for cutting-edge insights in learning. From early education to lifelong development, we dive into trends, innovations, and challenges facing learners of all ages. I'm Denise Pope, Senior Lecturer at Stanford's Graduate School of Education and co-founder of Challenge Success.
And I'm Dan Schwartz. I'm the Dean of the Graduate School of Education and the Faculty Director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning.
Together, we bring you expert perspectives and conversations to help you stay curious, inspired, and informed.
So in this section, Denise, who is a superb interviewer of a panel, is going to engage people with different kinds of expertise about the information ecosystem. So Alvin Lee is pursuing a BA in political science at Stanford. He describes himself as a proud product of California public schools. We'd like to think of him as one of Stanford's rock star future alums. Alvin is founder and executive director of GenUp, California's largest youth-led education policy organization. And he has news. He was one of 4 Stanford students named as Rhodes Scholar for the fall of 2025. Next is Valerie Ziegler. She teaches at Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco. She's been working with Sam for over a decade and was one of the first teachers to pilot Sam's new approach to teaching history through primary sources and trained her SFUSD colleagues to use it as well. So just this week, she had her students record their own podcasts about their AI experiences. So Valerie, you may just be more prepared than us. And not surprisingly, she was named a California Teacher of the Year. Now. Last, Janine Zacharia is the Carlos Kelly McClatchy Lecturer at Stanford, where she teaches journalism skills and techniques for understanding the changing news environment. She's written extensively on tonight's topic, including a newsroom playbook for propaganda reporting, helping even seasoned journalists manage the flood of misinformation. She may be the only female journalist, unaccompanied, married Jewish woman ever to be in Saudi Arabia. She went in 2011 during the Arab Spring to report for the Washington Post. It's really impressive. So thank you, Janine.
All right, I'm really excited for this panel. The way it's going to work is everyone's going to have a little chance to say a response to, after hearing the podcast, what is one idea that resonated with you. And then we'll open it up to more a conversation among us. So I want to start with you, Alvin. If you think about that conversation, what's one idea that really resonated with you?
This is a bit sort of more specific. The two of them can probably more talk about the broader picture, but Sam had a point about how a lot of students these days are using AI as a way to understand different information and literacy sources they're navigating. A lot of my friends are huge Perplexity fans. We're obviously sort of in the ivory tower here at Stanford in terms of how we consume information and leverage digital technology. But again, AI has this very powerful danger of hallucinations. I've seen it a lot from firsthand experience. And so when we talk about misinformation and disinformation, it's not just about the overabundance of false information that's coming our way all the time, but even in these very narrow institutions and technologies we use to interact and understand the world around us. So I think that's something to think more critically about too, is how AI is really transforming how we understand and perceive information.
Okay, we are gonna definitely delve further into that in a minute. But thank you, Valerie.
I'll key on 2 things. I think the first thing that Sam pointed out is that we could have this conversation in 2 weeks and it might be different. And as a classroom teacher, I am just trying to keep up with what the brain rot is this week. Because it's always changing and the technology is always changing and where students are getting their information is changing. And I think that that's a challenge for us in the classroom to keep up and to navigate and to shift and to really be able to serve students. The second thing is that I actually see the positives of how students are now approaching their online selves. And I think when we started this work initially, they didn't look for things to be fake. And now it's sort of the reverse. That's fake. That must be AI. And so I think they're coming to it with a lens now of growing up in a world where they don't trust everything. And I think once they have the skills, that we actually have I have a lot of faith in students to be able to do the digital literacy on their own.
Well, that makes me happy. We got to teach that to my mom, but okay. Janine.
All right, I have a lot of thoughts, but first I wanted to say that when you said, Sam, our eyes deceive us, and just obviously how hard this all is. And I was thinking back to the original problem, which is basically the internet turned everyone into a publisher, right? And so there are advantages to that, so you get to read more things than just, everybody has a voice, but there are serious problems. And the second thing was just how angry I feel about the fact that it's all on us to figure this out. There are other people who are responsible for this, namely many who live within 10 miles of here. The companies that have created these algorithms that are rewarding engagement rather than accuracy. And so until we solve that problem, we're going to be constantly fighting for downloads of curricula, right? And so I think that needs to be centered. And just how urgent it is for people to do what Sam's saying about knowing the author of the, being curious even. I was on a hike this past weekend, and one of the guides heard me telling what I do. I teach at Stanford, and so I started asking him, well, what's your media consumption, And he was telling me about a podcast that he really likes. And I said, tell me about the podcast. So it was called, I think, The Emerald, and he was telling me about it. And I said, yeah, who is it? Who does the podcast? And he really relies on this podcast, right? He said, it's Josh something. I said, well, who is Josh something? He had no idea. And this, I think, is people are, resonating with material without even the basic curiosity of who's putting that material out there. So that is just so critical to teach.
Yeah. Sam, these are the ahas. Do you have a reaction to any of these before I go deeper?
The reaction I have, I want to pick up on something that Valerie said, and this woman is an extraordinary educator. One of the reactions that people have is the opposite of being gullible is not trusting anything. My colleague Mike Caulfield calls it trust compression. When we distrust everything, we say, you can't believe anything that you read on the internet. Ultimately, we put ourselves in the hands of authoritarians. And so when a leader says, you can't believe anything, believe in me, that is a very dangerous place for democracy to be in. Yeah. And so the critical question for us as educators is how to cultivate a sense of discernment of what to believe in and what to reject, not this sense of you can't believe anything.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important. And I want to go back to Alvin because you're talking about misinformation and disinformation, and all of your peers are using this. So what are some things that you and your peers do when you face this? Are we in this we can't believe anything mode, or are there actual things that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's sort of in between. I think there's a lot of information where students might have requisite knowledge, where they can sort of discern that this is probably fake news. Our generation, Gen Z, was the first generation that sort of grew up chronically online, and so I think the benefit of that is we understand the utility of the technology, we understand how to navigate this information ecosystem. Obviously, not as well as we'd like to, but I still think there's that fundamental knowledge. But I think that where it gets really complex is when you're talking about information like political news, for example, right? Most folks are incredibly disengaged, and civic engagement is very critical because not only are students playing this role in social society, but your vote really sort of has profound impacts on very critical policy issues that are affecting all of us today that we're experiencing in 2025. So I think there's different levels to it. I think Gen Z is better equipped than other generations in navigating the complexity of disinformation, but I think by and large we still really need to hammer in the importance of digital literacy very early on in our public education systems to make sure that we're really addressing this crisis.
So Valerie, you see this daily. What are some of your, your teacher of the year. What are some of your hot tips? We've got a bunch of educators in here to help the sort of peer group of Alvin, although he's a little bit older than who you teach.
I think the first thing is that as educators, we have to practice what we preach and use these tools. I have been on ChatGPT and used it for different things. And when I started with the digital inquiry group looking at some of the lessons they were creating about AI, I said, before I can do this, I need to test all these things out and really get an understanding of how they work. So I think that's the first step. I think the other piece is just really helping students understand how lateral reading works. We do a lot of that in my class. That 30 seconds, that's what you need. But also just really engaging them. And what's great is when you put a bunch of students to ask AI a question, and they're all doing it at a table of 4, and they're all trying to get the same answer, and they all get different answers on the same topic. Then you have a conversation, right? And so then you have this ability to say, why are we all getting different answers? What does that mean? How do we go look at these sources? How do we ask the questions in the right way to get where we want to get?
To me, Janine, this is like the core of journalism, right? I mean, you're the professor, I'm not. So when you're teaching future journalists and also future consumers, what is it that they should be looking for to know the credibility of a source?
So I think I can't overstate this. I think it's an urgent national priority that people understand how credible fact-based news works and how to identify what you're saying, Denise. It used to be enough. I've been teaching at Stanford for 14 years. It used to be enough for me to go into the classroom and teach 15 to 20 students a quarter, these nice little, how do you find news, how do you do an interview, how do you verify information, and send them out into the world. It is not anymore. And I could talk more after about the things I'm doing to expand that reach.
Yeah.
But in terms of identifying, I mean, it's very, it's doing a little bit of what Sam said, but knowing what that legacy media, the much maligned mainstream legacy media, the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, AP, Reuters, they're your Encyclopedia Britannica. They're your history books that you teach in schools. And they abide by a certain set of standards, like there's an editor-reporter relationship, that there's actually like a team working there. It's not just one dude with a microphone, right? That there's accountability, that if I make something up, I'm going to get fired. That there are rules on anonymous sources that you can see published on their ethics standards on their website, and that most importantly, they actually publish corrections. These are things that you can clearly identify to know it's a credible fact-based source, a news source.
Super helpful, right? The fact checkers, right? The fact checkers exist for some of these places, but they call me up and check my quote.
Right.
Not everyone does that. Very few. But
Well,
the ones that do, it gives me faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the New Yorker's fact-checking is, it's legendary. Unfortunately, with cutbacks to journalism, we can talk about how that's a headwind that's affecting all these things I want them to do, but you don't have as many editors, right? So newspapers are struggling, but still, your local legitimate daily newspaper, the Denver Post or wherever you're from or something, has a team, and so that's what it's really not that hard. If you look at the sources, right, as opposed to reading everything that catches your attention or it echoes your confirmation bias without caring who they are, we would all be in a better place if everybody knew this one thing.
I 100% agree, but Alvin's friends are not getting their news from those places, right?
Yeah.
Where do you get your news? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot. You're probably different from your friend. You can speak more generally. Speak more generally.
More generally speaking, I think the TikTok is by far the biggest way that, at least speaking for college students, consume their news. Insta Reels is another really popular one. I think YouTube was mentioned earlier. I don't really know if people are using YouTube. That might be like a younger thing. I'm kind of old now. There's like 2 Gen Zs now. I didn't know about that. I'm like the older generation of Gen Z. That's trippy. Aging. But I'd say TikTok. I say that as a 22-year-old.
Yes. Oh, to be 22.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'd say TikTok and Instagram for sure. It's concerning, frankly, because, I mean, I have a lot of peers right now who are product design majors or synthesis majors here at Stanford, right? And their job literally is to then go into these tech companies, apply the latest cutting edge psychological research, and basically help make this product more addicting. And it's really, really concerning because nowadays, TikTok, Instagram, these little 15-second reels that are pushed onto your feed, it's the primary way that these students interact with the world, right? This is their identity. It's how they shape who they are. It's how they discover themselves. And that has really, really significant consequences that haven't been seen before sort of digital media exploded. And so, yeah, it's very scary. And I think that this is why digital literacy is so critical to that, because it's very important that students learn how to understand the effects of this content that they're seeing.
So Valerie, what's the pushback in your classroom? Do you say, folks, you probably shouldn't get your news from TikTok? Like, what's the pushback?
I don't say that, actually.
Okay, good.
I do current events once a week. I teach AP US politics. And, I will show them a variety of sources, credible news sources. And then at the end, I'll say, go find me a TikTok video about this topic. And again, then we have the conversation. And sometimes they are so different, and some of them are nonsense, but 90%. Right? But it's really that conversation of, sort of opening their eyes to, I would have scrolled through this, listened to that soundbite, and believed it. And it gets them to stop and say, okay, where is this information coming from? Where am I getting it? And just, I think, again, in high school, giving them the tools to think about that process. Because, again, their lives are digital. And when I ask students what do they want their parents to know about their lives, they're just on their screens. And so part of that is having those conversations about where they're getting their information so that hopefully when they aren't sitting in a US politics class and someone's forcing them to talk about it and look at it, they're doing that on their own.
Denise, I want to clarify something. We just did an event, our Rebley Symposium in the Department of Communication 2 weeks ago, right over there in the adjacent room, called The News Influencers. Oh, sorry, we did it in Encina. The News Influencers, what legacy media can learn from online content creators. So I'm not saying that everything on TikTok is wrong, right? And so we had Peter Hamby, who has a very popular Snapchat news show that reaches like 11 to 19-year-old target audience, but he came from CNN, and he abides by a certain set of standards. So people just, if they get psyched about someone, need to look at who that person is and what their training is. And on a positive note, I mean, I studied Sam's 2021 study, of course. I gave a talk at our daughters, they go to a 3rd through 8th public school in Redwood City, and they had a festival of words. And I made like an AI, version of the principal, and I put it up next to the real one, and they all very easily picked out, the real one. They were screaming, having fun. And then a little 4th grader raised his hand, and he said, what do we do? I'm not getting political, Dan, don't worry. What do we do when the President of the United States posts an AI photo of himself as the Pope? I was stunned, But the point is, I think they are so aware. My 11-year-old who's obsessed with skincare products right now and is on YouTube all day, and I'll say to her, Edie, Mommy, I researched it, and they know. I mean, not all of them, but I'm kind of more, is it bullish? What's the word? On the younger generation than I am the older generation right now a little bit. I don't want to sound a lot like Jeff Hancock, my colleague here, who's always like, everything's going to be fine. But they know a little bit of this,
Sam, you're making a face.
Well, what's the difference between surfing the internet and trying to figure out what to believe and, learning how to water ski? If you are learning how to water ski and something happens, you fall in the water and you get immediate feedback. When you're on the internet and you fall into a rabbit hole, you don't know that you've fallen into a rabbit hole.
There's no cost.
And so I taught a class, one of my last classes before we spun out as a nonprofit, called The Future of Information. And I want you to imagine some dude walking in with gray hair to a group of Stanford undergraduates, presuming to tell them something about the internet. Essentially, it was a morning class, so we had all of the Stanford athletes there. They were on their iPads looking at whatever else, but not at all paying attention. Until I gave them a website called the American College of Pediatricians and said, is this a bona fide source for that you should think about on the question of adolescent bullying? And we had a kind of U-poll where you could immediately did it, and something like 87% of the students said, yeah, this is a good site. This is a site that the Southern Poverty Law Center calls it an anti-LGBT hate site. And when we pointed that out, all of a sudden, the students who were looking down at their iPads saying, what's this guy going to tell me about the internet? All of a sudden, the recognition of I can be an easy mark. I am easily duped. So the first kind of step is to help people understand that how easily they can fall into a rabbit hole. Now, Alvin was one of the engineers, or certainly one of the people who helped support this piece of legislation, California AB 873, which mandates the teaching of digital literacy in the state of California. The problem we have, folks, is we have mandates without materials.
Yeah.
There is no budget line for creating the kind of curricula to actually put flesh on the bones of this piece of legislation. So right now, it's on the status, it has the status of essentially legislative hand-waving without the kind of budgetary consideration. One of the things that we're doing, and this is the way the nonprofit sector has to fill this goal, it is that our nonprofit is trying to seek support to create the kinds of materials that would actually be able to enact this piece of legislation and give it meaning.
No, totally. And I think it's great. And I'm so excited that you and your group helped to do that, Alvin. And I can tell you from my own work that I do with Victor Lee at the GSC, the students are much more involved and on ChatGPT and other large language models, and the teachers really aren't. I mean, Valerie, you're an exception to the rule right now. And now that's changing, and more teachers are learning about it, but there's also a real scarcity of professional development opportunities for educators to learn this, to even be able to put that curriculum into practice. Would you, Valerie, what's your views
I'm not
on that?
aware of any training for teachers how to use.
Okay,
I'm
School of
serious.
Education, Graduate School of Education, we
Yeah.
do. We have craft, we have a
But I'm
group
saying
that
no
does
one's
it.
coming into our school district and offering
Yeah.
this. This would be something that someone would have to sign up on their own free time
Yeah.
or do it on their own. There isn't any, imagine starting out the 25-26 school year with everybody taking a professional development about that.
Yeah.
That's different than me going on to understand ChatGPT and asking it to plan my vacation to Sicily based on the White Lotus, which is what I did. Right? I wanted to see how it worked, right?
And how was that for you, Valerie?
It made a beautiful graphic. But again, once I started using some of the materials that were created for Georgia State, which was interesting. Those materials were created, if I'm wrong, for an online class, correct? And I'm doing this in person. And once I started going through those lessons, I just realized there was so much that I didn't know. Mm-hmm. And again, that's the void. And I think you're right. It's this unfunded mandate aspect of it, but there's a lot of possibility in what it could be. And I think teachers are very interested in it. They're afraid of it, and therefore they would be open to having more training.
The point about Georgia State is some research that our nonprofit is doing is working with Georgia State University to put these kinds of ways of thinking into the regular curriculum. We were working with a professor of political science who is responsible for 24 different sections of the class and over 4,000 undergraduates. And he said, well, I don't have the mandate, nor do I have the budget to bring all of my faculty in to retrain them. And we said, let's offer this asynchronously and have students do this online, where we created and paired the kind of digital materials about the executive branch, about Brown-Jackson confirmation for the Supreme Court, so that we dovetailed the kind of media with the topics that students were already going to study. And we saw just over a short semester an 18% growth in students' ability to make wise decisions. So there's a lot of useful things we can do until we wait for the revolution. These small changes, if they accrue, can have a big dent. The only thing we can't do is nothing.
Okay, let's get this question over here from this microphone.
Thank you. I work with 11th and 12th graders as an academic advisor, so I'm not exactly a teacher, but part of the thing that I do is help with college essays, like admissions essays and scholarship essays. And I kind of ran into this fall a situation where lots of students were using AI to help them actually write their essays. And I think that this is the type of thing that manifests, especially when there are material incentives on the line, like there's money, there's admission to a prestigious institution, and it also applies to assignments at school. There are grades involved. And I found myself feeling just like, I mean, I didn't have AI when I was applying for stuff, so I don't know what to tell them except for like, it's the wrong thing to do. But like, is there any way to approach that? Is there anything that educators can do to address that kind of bad incentive?
That's a great question. Valerie, do you want to give your 2 cents?
A colleague came to me the other day and said that when she finally went to the lockdown browser, if you're not familiar with that, when you take an AP course, the students take their test in this browser that they can't go out. And this kid bombed. And she's like, it was so weird because everything he had done before in Google Docs was great. And then when he got to the fact that he had to have original thought, he couldn't do it. And so she pulled him aside and he admitted he had been using that. And she said, well, here we are. You can't write because you haven't had to. And so I think the conversation is, you're going to get into college on that premise that this is what you can create and you aren't able to. And I think that's the hard reality. And she made him redo every assignment that he had done. And he did it.
Alvin, you told a story about, I think it was your mom, when we were first talking. So I kind of want to get into what is some advice for parents, right? We've already talked about what schools need. They need PD, they need Sam's curriculum, they need teachers like Valerie, they need the Janines out there teaching about legacy media and how it works. Tell the story about your mom, not to embarrass Alvin's mom, and then what your advice would be for parents and for kids.
She's gonna get really mad at me for this one.
Okay,
but-
sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. So back in, I don't even know how old I was, but in 2016, I remember right before the election, that was 9 years ago, so this is too much math for me, guys, 13 or 14.
No worries.
I remember one day my mom asked me, I'm sure you guys remember about Pizzagate, because a lot of the sort of first-gen Chinese immigrant communities use WeChat as their primary form of communication. It's also where they gather and garner a lot of their political news, and so Pizzagate was really sort of going around. And I remember we were at the dinner table.
Can you just say what Pizzagate is?
Oh, yeah. This was a conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton was sort of the center of a sex trafficking ring out of a pizza shop in Brooklyn, New York, I think.
Comet Pizza in DC.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's associated with QAnon and all these really far right circles. But anyways, it was just really, really shocking to me that it had landed here, and it was very revelatory on a lot of things. I think the big thing being, I'm very, inspired by my mom's trajectory. She was a first immigrant from China. She got her PhD in biology from the University of Kentucky out in Lexington. So this was someone who has this very educated pedigree who was asking me about this really ludicrous question that me as a 13-year-old would be like, wow, this is like insane. Like, why are you asking me this, Mom? This is obviously not true. And so I think to your point earlier and Sam's point earlier, yes, our generation is a bit better equipped at discerning these credible and infactual sources. And I think the older generation is very much sort of at risk right now. And you're seeing this play out in politics right now, but that doesn't mean that we're free from it as well. And even with conversations from a lot of my friends as well, they really don't know what's right or wrong these days when they talk about politics and all these different issues happening.
So a piece of advice for either a parent or for your pals would be?
Just to question what you're consuming and just fact check it. I think to the lateral reading point, it's work, it's extra work, I know, to open Safari and go to Google and throw it in the search bar and maybe just scroll around and see what the different outlets are, but I think
it's 30 seconds, apparently.
30 seconds, yeah, right? Yeah. And honestly, 30 seconds is a lot, right? We're used to this 15-second immediate scrolling environment these days. Our attention deficits have really plummeted because of TikTok and the way we consume media. So, even 30 seconds sounds like a lot of work for most students, but I think, unfortunately, that's just what needs to happen.
No, that's what we're up against.
Yeah, but again, to the final point, I think that's where digital literacy comes in, and I'll keep this really brief, 10 seconds, but building on Sam's point, The beauty of this legislation and the call to action to everyone here in the audience today, because I know we have a good amount of educators, is that this bill would require the state to look at incorporating media literacy standards into the statewide instructional curriculum. But it's really sort of up to local school districts, especially at the school district level, to have their curriculum committees then adopt this media literacy curriculum once it's rolled out by the state and then implement it at the school site level. So you all as educators and members of the community have a really big role to play in really ensuring that media literacy actually lands in schools and isn't just the state sort of waving a magic wand and virtue signaling.
No, I think that's so important. And Valerie, you're in it every day. You're in the school. You're in the classroom. You know, let's say your peers hear about this media literacy. I can already hear in my head, wait, I'm a math teacher. I'm a this teacher. You know, you have an edge in a way, or people might say this because of the topic that you're teaching. It seems like it really fits. So what would you say to your advice for your peers?
You know, I'm a social studies teacher, but I'm also a CTE teacher.
Okay,
And
explain what CTE is.
For technical education, and specifically in the energy, utilities, and environment sector. And yes, there are lots of things out there about climate change, so that would be a natural. But I think the conversation, again, is there's content that's learned in high school, but there's also skills. And our job is, you know, as high school educators is really to equip students with the skills to be successful outside of them. There are soft skills, you know, how to write a resume, how to get up in front of a group of people, how to have conversations. And I think this is one of these soft skills that all of us should be working together to make our students digitally illiterate.
Advice, Janine?
For parents, I think you have to model good behavior like everything else, right? Like kick $10 a month to your local public media. Tell your kids what that is. Put it on the radio. Subscribe to a newspaper and send them links to those articles and make sure they're logged in so they don't hit the paywall. Like, you know, ask them how they know things when they say something, or ask them to show you the TikTok. Oh, what is that? Oh, who is that person? Oh, really? Did you see who that, you know, engage with them about it. And that's what I try to do with our kids.
Love it. Sam, last word before Q&A.
You know, the work that we're trying to do, which is to fill this gap and to give meaning to some of the kinds of things that we know need to happen. Right now, there is a chasm between students' lived experience and the experience that they have in school. We have to find a way to create a bridge between those two worlds.
Big round of applause for our panelists. So many different topics were hit, and I know we really want to hear from you. So if you have a question, you can come up to one of the microphones.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. This was such an insightful panel. My name is Nora. I teach in a program for writing and rhetoric. Lots of first years and second year students. I've got one of them here. I'm really glad they're here. I want to share a tiny anecdote and just perhaps have you think out loud with me. I was giving feedback to a student on Canvas, and lo and behold, a little AI pop-up showed up, prompting me, a writing instructor, to get help. And I was like, wait a second, is Canvas promoting this? This is an issue. And then with a little bit more research, I realized it was a Chrome plugin. And for the life of me, I don't remember consenting. So maybe a question for you, Janine. We're in Silicon Valley, you drive on the highway, you get all those AI is here, future is good posters. But what can we do as an institution to invite a lot of these executives to come, sit in a panel right with you there, and engage with educators? Because I believe one of you mentioned it's us, the educators, who are picking up the pieces. It's us who, in addition to my lesson plan, my main assignments, I have to integrate AI literacy. I mean, I've been integrating digital literacy, but this is a whole new beast. It's very easy to get labeled as a Luddite. I am not. My course theme is on social media and digital communication. But this is new, this is different. You've all said that. So my question concisely, I hope, is can we invite a lot of these professionals, highly professional tech-based programmers, etc., to engage in these discussions with educators, because we know what's going on.
Let's have Janine
Thank you.
answer that.
Dan, I think it's a good idea. I mean, Listen, you know, what's interesting is, I mean, a lot of the people who created these technologies send their kids to Waldorf schools, Denise, no?
Yeah, they do.
Okay?
They do.
So let's be real about it. And I think, you know, we could go to John Hennessy, you know, who's here, and he's very, you know, we could get him to arrange this, and we can host that kind of, this is the place that should happen.
Yeah.
And we should make sure that doesn't, that Chrome plugin, I mean, we can't, the way Google is pushing the AI thing right now is making me a little nuts.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's really nuts. And I think there should be a way to rectify that.
It's tempting to go on with long questions, but we do have a lot of people who want to ask. So keep your questions as concise as possible, if that's possible. And sir, you are on.
Proud 1994 Stanford Teacher Education Program graduate.
Yay! Welcome.
So thank you for having this program. Thank you for having a practicing educator on the panel.
Yes, of course.
My question is that you've cited the study from 2021 multiple times. As fast as all of these technologies are developing, do you worry that the relevance of that study diminishes over time as a result of the changes in the technologies and the speed with which people are beginning to get used to using them in different ways?
Sam.
I would worry about it if the subsequent studies showed a fundamentally different result. Unfortunately, to our great dismay, they don't. And so there's more recent studies. But I think that leaves a kind of pessimistic sense that I don't want to hover above this room. What we've also done since 2021 is we have done studies where we did a randomized control study in Lincoln, Nebraska public schools. And we showed that in less than 6 hours of instruction, students grew at a rate of 40% in their ability to make thoughtful choices about what to believe. 6 hours is 2 hours less than the average amount of time a teenager spends online in one day. Yeah. So just imagine what could happen if this was put into the warp and woof of the way of the curricula that we have. So again, we can move the needle. These things are not intransigent. They're not things that can't be taught, but they need to be taught.
That's more hope from Sam. I just want to keep pointing that out. This is an uplifting panel. Sir, you have a question.
Hi, my name is Emilio, current Stanford Teacher Education Program candidate.
Yay! Thank you.
This one is for you, Sam. So Twitter's AI, Grok, recently had this, you know where I'm going with this?
Yes.
And I refuse to call it X. They had this thing where no matter what question you would ask it, it would give some sort of response about white genocide in yes. South Africa. And, you know, understanding Elon Musk's politics and his investment in this, it comes to no surprise. But I personally think that this happening is kind of a good thing because it sort of debunks a lot of the mysticism that's around AI and some people treating it as just absolute gospel and just believing everything that it says. So I think that now AI is starting to fall under the same credibility range as some of the popular news outlets, where there's going to be a category of people that just sit down and just believe everything it says at face value. And there's going to be others that with increased digital and media literacy are able to kind of look at it from a more critical lens. So I wonder, what are your thoughts on where we're headed in terms of how we view AI credibility, and if there are any either systemic changes or there's a talk about professional development that can be implemented that can help kind of close that gap of people that just take everything that AI says at face value and people that are able to be more literate and view things through a critical lens.
Sam.
So recognize that these products are not altruistic products. They're products that depend upon the marketplace. And so there was a piece recently in The Atlantic by my colleague, my co-author of Verified, Mike Caulfield, about the sycophancy of ChatGPT, where there is a particular example. Someone asks the bot, what do you think about the possibility of monetizing shit on a stick? And the bot responds, genius idea. Now, again, that's a particularly extreme example, but OpenAI has since tweaked the way it kind of responds to this. But it was this idea that the bot wants you to continue to use it. It wants you to continue to resubscribe or to go to the more powerful Notion. For those of you who are using the free version of Gemini, you realize that after a certain period of time, a very short period of time, it says, if you want to continue, here's how you sign up. If you're a college student, you can do it for free in order to kind of create this dependency that you absolutely need it for as an accompaniment to your life. So these things are not, again, there's a saying in the Valley that if it's free, you're the product.
Okay, let's get this question over here from this microphone.
Thank you. My name is Luke. I work with 11th and 12th graders as an academic advisor, so I'm not exactly a teacher, but part of the thing that I do is help with college essays, like admissions essays and scholarship essays. And I kind of ran into this fall a situation where lots of students were using AI to help them actually write their essays. And I think that this is the type of thing that manifests, especially when there are material incentives on the line, like there's money, there's admission to a prestigious institution, and it also applies to assignments at school. There are grades involved. And I found myself feeling just like, I didn't have AI when I was applying for stuff, so I don't know what to tell them except for, it's the wrong thing to do. But, is there any way to approach that? Is there anything that educators can do to address that kind of bad incentive?
That's a great question. Valerie, do you want to give your 2 cents?
A colleague came to me the other day and said that when she finally went to the lockdown browser, if you're not familiar with that, when you take an AP course, the students take their test in this browser that they can't go out. And this kid bombed, and she's like, it was so weird because everything he had done before in Google Docs was great. And then when he got to the fact that he had to have original thought, he couldn't do it. And so she pulled him aside and he admitted he had been using that. And she said, well, here we are. You can't write because you haven't had to. And so I think the conversation is, you're going to get into college on that premise that this is what you can create, and you aren't able to. And I think that's the hard reality. And she made him redo every assignment that he had done. And he did it.
I think it also goes to the ethics piece that we had talked about too. It's like, what is the purpose of school, right? And what is the purpose of this essay? And it's really to showcase who you are. And if you so badly need to outsource that, right, you haven't done the kind of reflection that you need to do to really think about the purpose of your education, of college, of the essay in and of itself. So yeah, thank you for what you do. It is definitely changing the landscape of college admissions, definitely. Sir, you have a question.
Hi, my name is Rahul. I took a class with Professor Wineburg my freshman year, probably the most life-changing class. We also have Allie and Katie over here.
Look at your fan base, Sam. I love it.
The class group chat is very much still active, even 4 years later. And so I did a class about historical truth with Professor Wineburg, and our assignments throughout the quarter ranged from discussion posts in which we engage each other in writing about questions and ideas from the text that we read, all the way to short papers, and then finally a long paper at the very end. And my question for you, Professor Wineburg, is if you had to teach the course this year, how would you redefine the syllabus?
Nice question. Put him on the spot.
Time is up. It's been really nice.
You can
Thank you for your
spitball. Just
question.
spitball, Sam. Just spitball.
No, it's a great question. And, in some ways, I thank my lucky stars I don't have to answer it. I think that it's interesting. We're going to go back to blue books in order to create a kind of sense of responsibility. At the same time, I do not want to convey the sense that we should ban large language models in terms of helping us think about our writing. I would love, but I'm not going to ask people to do this, to ask members of the audience who've had to write an essay or had to write an important email, how many of them have plugged it into ChatGPT or into Gemini, and to ask for give me feedback on tone, give me feedback on word choice, give me feedback on organization of ideas. I will confess to you, it's one of the things that I generally do regularly, and I learn a lot. And so going back to the very early part of the conversation, we are literally standing on unstable ground. We haven't figured out how to use these immensely powerful tools that are changing our sense of education literally as we speak. The idea somehow that we're not going to use it and we're only going to go to Blue Books, no. I think there has to be a combination. And I think to go back to a sense of honesty and maybe even Stanford's honor code, where we have to sign something that says, yes, we've used ChatGPT, but we've used it in order to help us conceptualize the overall flow of something that we've written rather than to do that work for us.
It's helping us become even better than we are in an ethical and responsible way. Brooke, you have something from our audience?
I do. There's actually a lot of questions from the audience, so
Okay.
we go through folks, but I'll just take one now and then maybe come back. This is for Valerie or Janine, or a combination of both of you. Both of you right now teach subjects that I think we said earlier do lend themselves to teaching this kind of work like digital literacy or fact-checking. How do we empower teachers across schools and across colleges to teach digital literacy that they may even not feel confident in themselves, and that their students might know more about them, or about the subject?
Go first. I think I spoke to this a little bit, but I would add that there's so many, I mean, Sam can tell a story on every topic, right? And he does it beautifully. And there's all these stories that we could connect to I'm sure he could find one right now that a PE teacher could use, right? And so thinking about that, I think it becomes that grabber, right? What can I use in my classroom that students are gonna look up from their laptop when they get this fact about the pediatrician, right? I mean, I think that's part of it, but it's also just making it accessible so that teachers have it and they aren't having to go out and find all of this.
Yeah, I mean, you had, how many, 67 downloads you said? They can do more, right?
67,000.
67,000. Go 67,000, Janine.
You could have more. You could have more downloads. He's got the modules ready to go, right?
We do. We need more. I mean, this is the challenge.
Yeah, but make it easy to plug in. I mean, one of the things I'm doing, we have Stanford Digital Education here. And they've asked me to adapt my Com 104 reporting, writing, and understanding the news class. So it's going to be a digital version to go out to Title I high schools across the country. So I'm hoping to hit thousands of students through this. And we're going to I'm designing it right now, like how we're going to do the media literacy. So I think people are starting to innovate on this front.
And if I could add just, you know, having journalism in high schools is something that we're constantly having to fight for. Yeah. And I think that's such a natural place. And we finally in SFUSD got so that you can take journalism as your English class as well. And that crossover, I think, is just a great
Well, that's one of the reasons
point.
I'm doing it, because so many high schools don't have it. Right. So this is going to go specifically to high schools that don't have it. And I couldn't agree more. I think that's my whole thing, that if we can teach people to do journalism, actually do it, then we can restore respect for credible fact-based sources, and they won't think we're fake news and enemy of the people.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have time. Let's just do two more questions, because I'm mindful of, we could go on all day. Would you like to take it?
Sure. You brought up Wikipedia a few times as a more trustworthy source, and Wikipedia, of course, is a nonprofit, and I'm curious whether, we know that there are a lot of nonprofits that are also nefarious, but is the nonprofit governance structure inherently more trustworthy in some ways, particularly when it comes to journalism, nonprofit journalism versus for-profit journalism, or, is it all equally potentially evil?
You asking about Wikipedia or nonprofit journalism?
In general, the nonprofit versus for-profit governance structure. Yeah.
I didn't bring up Wikipedia. Dan brought up Wikipedia, right?
Sam brought up Wikipedia.
Who brought it up? Sam? Dan brought it earlier. Sam brought it up.
Denise originally brought it up.
For tonight.
Check the transcript.
Okay, tonight I brought it up first.
Rerun the tape.
Yes. Okay,
But
Janine.
when I give a talk, I call the error of noise, from fake news to the future of journalism, and I say 6 things you can do right now. The first thing is support public media. And we are in a crisis in this country right now with what's going on with NPR right now. And if you want something to do, You better get on the horn and call your congresspeople and call your senators and say this cannot stand. Because
Thank you, Janine. Totally.
you are not getting a good, healthy media diet if all you're doing is watching like MSNBC or Fox or CNN at night and getting agitated.
Or TikTok.
Or TikTok. This is entertainment. This is talk radio in these new forms. We need public media, yes. Where there's a serious disinformation campaign is about, oh, it's all liberal lie and all this and everything. You know, I chaperoned my daughter's 8th grade trip to DC last month. You know why I went? In the middle of the quarter when I had teaching 2 classes? Because I wanted them to see the Korean War Memorial, but I wanted them to go to NPR. And I took them and we arranged a trip. And everybody here, when their kids or they know kids going on the 8th grade trip, I said, why are we not doing this School Tours of America? Show the kids what's happening at NPR.
Love it.
It's a gem. We have to fight to support it.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah.
Brooke, last question. Oh, and then Sam will let you talk. But
Sam
Brooke,
doesn't
last
like
question.
NPR?
We'll leave NPR for a second, but I want to address the idea of nonprofits. Again, if by a show of hands, how many people think that if a domain has .org, it's gone through a vetting process? Raise your hand. Oh, come on, liars.
It's a trick question.
ORG is a completely open domain. It's one of the main things that students fall into.
Yes.
They think that they can look at the top level domain and say that somehow a .org is better than a .com. You and your goldfish can go out and get meandmygoldfish.org for about 15 minutes and $15 right now. So it's one of the kinds of things that might have had some kind of traction and relevancy when we used a dial-up modem to connect to the internet. It is something that bad actors are exploiting right now. As far as nonprofits, the IRS is so overwhelmed by applications that something like each year, and even with cutting off of staff at IRS, I think in 2008, Rob Reich did a study that showed 96% of all applications are approved. So nonprofit status is one of the things that a lot of bad actors use in order to pull the wool over our eyes.
Super important point. Okay, Brooke, you have a lot of power because you get to ask the last question. Hopefully it'll be a little bit short one.
I know, it's so hard. They're so good. But I like this one. It's from one of our professors. And it says, for babies who are born to and live in the AI and technology-rich society, how early should we start practicing with them digital literacy?
Sam, do you want to answer that?
I mean, the very kind of clipped answer I can give is as early as we put a smartphone into a child's hands.
That's a good answer. Folks, what a panel. What a night. Let's give a big round of applause for these folks. Thank all of you for joining in this episode of Schools In. It was so much fun to do. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you tune in.